Hello and welcome back to the Building HVAC Science podcast. It's our goal here to help create better, more knowledgeable HVAC and building performance technicians by helping these two professions better understand each other, with the ultimate goal of making customers happy in the homes they live in and the buildings they work in. Today's topic's a little bit different than some of the last ones. I think I'm saying that a lot lately, but today's topic, we're talking with Derek Cowburn, who's founder of Lumen Cache. And he'll discuss his journey from building automation and pharmaceutical manufacturing to actually pioneering a new product, and I dare say a new product category, smart DC power systems for homes and offices, and actually industrial facilities too, and shop lighting, basically construction, whole host of areas. Lumen Cache is a company focused on creating a smart infrastructure that integrates DC power to drive lighting, sensors, and automation. And Derek gets in all the details. This is his passion. This is his life's work. I think he said he's been working on this for 11 or 12 years. And he explores some of the challenges in getting these concepts to be adopted mainstream. Derek also highlights the potential of integrating indoor and outdoor air quality and energy management sensors, envisioning homes and offices that are smart from the start without the need for complex retrofit. It's a really intriguing episode. There's a ton of links in the show notes with regard to his YouTube channel, a system design tool they're working on, their website, the company, LinkedIn, just a ton of great information. I hope you enjoy this episode where Eric Kaiser and I learned from Derek Cowburn from building automation to smart homes, the Lumen Cache revolution.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Building HVAC Science podcast, another episode. Bill Spohn over there, Eric Kaiser here. With us today, special guest from around the world, Mr. Derek Cowburn of Lumen Cache. Derek, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you guys this evening, morning. What time is it?
Yeah. Morning, afternoon, evening. It's whatever time it is that everybody listens.
For some reason, the flat earthers are never going to get past this call, I think.
Derek, again, welcome to the show. Lumen Cache, I'm going to say a technology company that focuses on lighting and homes or buildings. I don't know a ton about this other than reading a little bit of your website and some of your LinkedIn bio. Tell us a little bit about Lumen Cache and how you got to running or inventing a lot of this stuff.
Lumen Cache, lighting is the low-hanging fruit, but the root of this thing actually comes from my experience in building automation systems. So my first career was running a 50-building pharmaceutical campus in Rahway, New Jersey. And when I went for my interview as an intern between my junior and senior year of college at Clarkson, which we were just talking about, we had about a 15-minute interview. And my boss at that time, he says, come on, let's take you up to the machine room. And so he was all excited showing me these energy recovery ventilation systems. And this is for labs, these big, huge fume hoods that are sucking in 100% outside air and exhausting most of it. So that was my first experience that I thought the entire world worked that way. This was in 1988. And it turned into a great career. I ended up writing my own job description. I very quickly found a role there. And the cool thing was that I was working with really brilliant operators and mechanics. And they didn't know the computers like I did. I wrote and sold my first software when I was 14, so I've been around computers most of my life. But they're the ones that really taught me, how do you tune a building? How does it work? How do all the mechanical systems work? And even though I was getting a mechanical engineering degree at the time, there's just so much experience. And the biggest learning experience I had was that these guys were all retiring or dying, and all of their knowledge was going with them. And that was the problem. So it's like my first foray into AI was an expert system. We were trying to capture if this, then that. What do you do in these circumstances? And again, this is back in the early 90s. And so that concept of being able to automate the building operation and commissioning just always stuck in my head. But it's, okay, how do we do this? Well, you need to control everything, and then you need to have a lot of sensors. That combination is important, and they need to be perfectly reliable. So as wireless got better and better, still totally imperfect for the task, but it always feels like it's just out of reach. It's almost there, but you really needed something that was wired. And again, you also have to do control, because then you can essentially put it into a large language model like we have today and give it a head start. Like you have to say, these things are contextually paired with each other. This thing controls humidity and temperature or affects humidity and temperature, and this thing controls it. And so then the tuning algorithms can then sort through all of the different combinations and figure out pretty accurately how do you control and commission, and then you can put guardrails around it. But that's where this whole thing started, actually, was AI control of buildings 30 years ago.
Wow. When you say AI, well, we talk about AI today. You mentioned the large language learning module. That almost feels like you're expanding the definition of AI to beyond what a lot of us consider as AI. Because going back 30 years, a lot of the AI that we had at that time would be basic, almost self-tuning PID loops and things like that, correct?
Yeah. It's fuzzy logic. Remember the term used to be?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So the whole point is it's basically just like vectors of probability. That's all it is. So all these new AI large language models, they're just massively large vectors of probability of something connecting with something else. And you can do that. And that's really why the AI would have to learn just like the building operators learn. You never had someone who just came in and then could operate a big building. They always have to follow the guys before them and learn, oh, okay, in this circumstance, you want to pre-cool this area by this much. I used to laugh that the union operators, the management used to complain because they said, oh, they're lazy. They don't like to do their rounds. But these guys were sitting there in the morning, they're reading the newspaper, and finally they'd get up and they'd go do the rounds. They'd tweak a valve here, they'd change a thing there. And I came to realize what they were doing was they were looking at the newspaper to find out what meetings were going on today. What was the weather going to be like today? What events were going on? And so they were essentially pre-cooling or tuning the building to match that. That trend can be gathered by an AI system. It can capture enough information to do that. But again, it all comes down to having really good, reliable sensors. So that was like a piece of it. AI is just one piece of this whole thing. The other massive wave that occurs is DC, direct current. It used to be a lot of devices were natively AC, like light bulbs. They're natively AC. Now they're all electronics. All LED lights are electronics. So they're closer to a cell phone than an actual coil that's heating up. You've got everything from the load side that's all DC. Obviously, VFDs and all of our motor controllers, they're all DC inside. They have to take the AC, rectify it, turn it into DC, and then invert it back into some three-phase motor control. And you have solar panels and batteries, also all DC, direct current. So this was like a whole nother wave. And I thought that wave was going to just wash over us by 2014.
Here we are 10 years later.
Yeah, exactly. So foolishly, I started Lumen Cache in Earth Day in 2011, thinking full well, like, 3 years from now, the world's going to switch. It's all going to be DC. We're going to have solar panels, we're going to have batteries everywhere. Yeah, what is this? Maybe last year it happened. I started way, way too early. But that actually worked out in our favor. Surviving for an extra 12 years gives you an opportunity to learn an awful lot. And that's essentially what I did. So I just hunkered down. I survived the on-ramp, and it turned into this pretty cool story.
So I like the tagline you have, build all houses and offices smart from the start. It's catchy. It makes sense. Do you think that smart is just that AI component, or they're reactive to conditions or predictive? Does that encompass all of smart, or is there more to smart?
I actually started a much simpler level. Think about smart home is mostly connected home. It's really not smart at all. We use the term smart home, but to be honest, builders have been building homes for, I don't know how long we've had smart products, but there's still only about a 6% adoption rate after 35 some years, whether it started with X10 or other technologies. And so even though the technologies have gotten significantly better, the builders are still the gatekeepers. So when I was looking to say, well, how do we make this mainstream? When I left the pharmaceutical industry, it was funny. I remember talking with a residential HVAC controls company, and I was calling their tech support, and I'm like, how do I do VAV systems? And he's like, it's a house.
Oh, like, stop. Don't bother me.
Exactly. And I'm like, yeah, so don't all houses have something like this? And it's like, no, they just do turn it on and off. And the concept of airflow monitoring and VAVs and all that stuff was just so naturally ingrained in me because that's what I grew up with, so to speak, from first year out of college. So I was frustrated to see how far the building community had to go. And then all the trades that are affected by that. So the trades oftentimes will kind of put in the least common denominator. It's whatever they're used to, what makes them the most money. Those are the things that really impact that. The schedule, cost, and quality drivers for builders are absolute. That's the most important thing. Is this going to delay my start? A day is expensive. Is this going to cost a little bit more because I only have this much in the budget? And anything like that. So it's schedule, cost, and quality. Quality is more reliability. So I was like, okay, well, how do I get past the gatekeepers? How do we flip that script so that instead of having just 6%, we get 94% of the builders? So what I did instead is I focused very heavily on what are the needs of the builders. Again, it gets back to that schedule, cost, quality. So the technology, the IP of the product lends itself perfectly to solving these problems. For example, you have to have a really reliable light switch. Nobody who puts in a wired light switch questions whether it's going to work or not every time you hit the button. But every time you go to hit the button on a wireless one, there's a chance it's not going to work, or it'll be slow or something. I mean, I have a little light switch in our table lamp next to our bed, and I would say maybe 2 times a month, when I hit the button on the phone, it doesn't work. So that is unacceptable to a builder because a builder doesn't know how acceptable it's going to be to the homeowner. Maybe the guy's married. It's kind of a funny example, but that's a good example. I mean, how many smart switches do well-meaning guys need to pull out? It's like they put it in because they're kind of like, oh, my wife's going to love this. It's so convenient for her. And then a year later, she's like, tear that out. It's annoying. It doesn't work all the time. So that's the first thing. It's got to be very reliable. Every time you hit the light switch, it's got to work. The good news is that with a wired system, it's easier to do that kind of reliability. We've been doing it in commercial systems for years, right? RS-45 networks. There's all kinds of ways to work around that problem. And of course, the software and the firmware that we put into it. So the builders needed to get over that hump first, reliability. The other thing was any type of fixture. That's a big deal. You can't just have like, oh, well, we have 5 fixtures. Their designer wants this particular model and it uses this thing, and they don't care. They want to have endless supply of all the different fixtures. So that was the second thing. The other things that got us over the hump with the builders really had to do with just them accepting the fact that a Cat 5 is a reasonable replacement for the heavy gauge copper, the Romex that they would typically install. And we got lucky with that this year. Lucky by means that electricians were giving quotes and the builders were like, whoa, I only want 1 house, not 2. What is this? Why are you twice the price? And it turns out copper being over 10,000 a ton is just killing these guys. So the electricians are making less, et cetera. So it was a really fortunate thing that happened. That was the key drivers for getting the builders to accept this. The reliability, the ease of it. You don't have a service contract. Anybody can install it was the last thing. So the cool thing about it, or one of the cool things, is that it's very plug and play. And by that, we mean that when you plug in a light, if it's not compatible with the driver card that's in the panel, it just won't turn on. It won't damage anything. It just tells you on the display, hey, you put in a strip light attached to a driver that's expecting a bare LED. Those 2 things aren't compatible. Change this to a CC driver or change the light. So by making it so easy to use, now anybody can install it. So you don't need to wait for Sparky to come back. You definitely don't need to wait for a technician to come back. You're not going to have a guy rolling up with a laptop and a high price tag. And so now we got electricians interested because electricians are like, this is great. I can use cheaper apprentices for this. All I got to do is teach them how to tip Cat 5s, which I'm not great at anyway. So I like having apprentices do it. So that kind of gives the builders confidence because once the electricians know, hey, I can make money doing this, using this product, the builders usually will bend towards what their trades recommend. So that was the big thing. The whole thing that you caught on to with the building homes smart from the start really means that the builder that used to be the gatekeeper keeping the technology out is now the enabler. He's now the one who's putting in all of this capability to have all kinds of smart apps that are added onto it afterwards, and they don't have to pay for it up front.
So something really made me think when you were talking about this and looking at all this technology, and I've followed a lot of technology over the years and I've seen a lot of changes in it. Do you think people are resistant to adopt new things, especially in something as standardized as, I don't know, home electrical wiring, because the technology changes so often?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had people describe to me, they said, holy cow, different words. You're changing the foundation of modern civilization. Like what you just described is accurate. We all know what comes out of the outlet. It's the same standard. And every time we see one of those two-prong plugs, we know what to plug into it. But if you notice nowadays, when you buy a phone or you buy any device, it always has a USB jack on it now. And it doesn't even come with the adapter most of the time. So the world definitely will change. Now, none of us go out and say, oh, I just bought a new house. I want to make sure that I have my telephone connected up. It's almost not even a thing that we think about anymore. So the world does change, even something as fundamental as where we get our power from. We now think of power coming from a USB port. If you're in an airport, that's probably what you're looking for is a USB port. Or if not, you've already got your adapter with you. So it does take a little bit of time to change, but then we've been doing this for 10 years, 12. So what's nice is that we've got all that history behind us. There's $2.2 million of the original prototype out there running. And that history gives builders enough confidence to say, oh, okay, so I'm not the first. I'm like, no, you're not the first. You're going to be the first of the new generation, but the new generation is, man, it's like a cell phone compared to the old one. The old one was just barely had any controllers in it and everything. The new one has so many safety features. It's almost over the top what it does for the safety, but I don't want to have anything happen like the Hindenburg. Hindenburg happened, and so now we couldn't have a hydrogen for whatever it was, 60 years. So the whole power limited energy, category 4 power, fault managed power, whatever name you want to give to it, that whole concept literally changes the way electricians can wire up 60% of homes and buildings. 60% of homes and buildings are lights and switches. So think about like the safety of the wiring is not based on the skill level of the electrician that installs it. It's based on whether or not the factory built the product correctly and it went through the UL properly. Because, like I said, you cannot plug it in a way that would cause it to allow the energy to damage anything. So you can't overload a circuit, for example. You can't cause a short that would give you a signal over a ground, for example, things like that. It's just very different. The DC world in general is different. But then once you get into fault managed power, it's a whole nother category.
So you've given us the landscape of how you started doing this, what motivated you, why, the concepts, the benefits. But you're actually making product now. Is that correct?
Yeah. As we said when we started here, I'm in China. And what happened was I was in Indianapolis when I said, okay, it's time to make this. The world's going to change. And so a friend of mine was starting a consulting business for product development in California, Southern California. So I'm like, okay, I'll go there because Southern California is way better for developing products. So in 3 months, we made the first prototype and made the patent around it at that time and went to our first light fair show. And we had 400 interested dealers. It was like a flood. Everybody was seeing this thing, and there's people that were coming back to the booth 10 times and just amazed at this concept. And so I was like, whoa, this is a big deal. Like I absolutely stepped in something at this point. And so about a year later is when it changed from a lighting package to an infrastructure. That was when I realized, wait a minute, this can do way more than just lighting. We can do drivers beyond just a constant current or a constant voltage driver. We could do a PoE driver midspan. We could do Dolly, DMX, KNX, BACnet, Modbus, like whatever kind of driver you want to slap into those card slots, you can do that. And if you've seen on the website, there's the picture of the product. It looks kind of like a breaker panel. It's very reminiscent of a breaker panel. The wires are, instead of the wires being visible on the sides, it's hidden down the center. But you still have these little modules on the sides. They look kind of like ribs. And they can change very quickly anytime you want to update the technology. So this concept, I realized, was much bigger than I expected. So then by the time it was about 2016. And at this point, we're selling some good amount of product, keeping alive. always looking for an investor to get on board. And investors were I think it was just way too early. And I've had people say you're trying to boil the ocean. I'm like, that's true. Well, guess what? After 12 years of adding this much heat to it, guess what? You'll eventually boil the ocean. But at that point in 2016, I realized I really need to go big league. I need to go where all the electronics are built. And that's Shenzhen, China. So I looked around to different incubators, and there was an incubator that's the top one in the world. It's harder to get into HACS than to get into Harvard, but I don't care. That's where I wanted to go. I still think it was the absolute best decision because they bring you here for 3 months. You learn not only they're a good incubator as far as showing you the ropes and things, but it gives you an opportunity to really learn why Shenzhen, this 40-year-old city, is built for manufacturing. And so one of the most important things that we accomplished is the design for manufacturability that allowed me to get the cost down so that this product can be sold at a parity with the existing AC commodity lighting. Let that sink in. You're getting all of this extra capability for something that's the same price. And so usually every time I say that, I say, thank you, Shenzhen. And what's interesting was I came here thinking, well, I'm going to learn everything about how they manufacture here, and then I'm going to bring it back. Midwest has a lot of manufacturing, a lot of talent there. And unfortunately, I realized that you just can't pick it up and move it here. There's ecosystem. There's the factory that might take 10 city blocks, and then there's 30 blocks around it that are the support factories for that factory, and there's another 100 city blocks around that are the support of those factories. It's just an incredible place. It's kind of like, if you're a Star Wars fan, it's like Coruscant, the place that they make all of the clone. I remember I went into one factory and it was a sea of these massive plastic presses. And I jokingly said something like, can you build me a Death Star? And the sales guy was very funny because he's like, yeah, but we've got a minimum order quantity of 5.
And those are usually made in ones, right?
Yeah, usually Death Stars, you can only make one. But here, it's like, I don't even want to take the order unless you can build at least 5. And I've given commencement speeches at the graduate school here. And over the years, I've become somewhat of a fixture in Shenzhen. And one of the things that I love to say on my slide decks is that they don't speak English. They don't speak Mandarin. They speak volume. And you must speak their language. Like, the factories are absolutely incredible. They will allow you to scale unlimited. I've got a factory for fixtures, for example. They can do 200,000 fixtures per month, no problem. So if we get a big order tomorrow, a large developer just says, hey, we just want to go all in on this, no problem. So that level of capacity is just something that's unmatched. But what's cool is we've got the Department of Energy has been asking us for a business plan for the last 3 years because we can onshore this. We can. That's what's neat about it. There's a few number of components in this thing, which means that we can actually build a fairly automated factory to be able to keep the costs are roughly the same, almost identical, as a matter of fact. So that's a really exciting thing for me is in the next few years when we start to bring all this manufacturing and have at least 2 hubs of manufacturing so that we can mitigate any kind of supply risks, et cetera.
That's pretty neat to be able to do that and move it around like that. You mentioned Indianapolis, which ironically is where I'm sitting at right now. But you said you started out in New York. What did you move from Indy to New York or between the two there? How did you transition then into lighting?
I lost a bet.
Surprisingly, that's like 1 in 3 answers when we ask them on the podcast.
That may have been the best answer yet.
No, it was funny. So I don't know if you guys know, but I bought Energy Options with Brad in 2002. And then that was eventually purchased by Alberio Energy. Energy Options was the seed of that. So I grew up in New Jersey and I used to own, like I said, Energy Options was New Jersey's largest Andover Controls dealership. And then when I left and I sold my shares over to Brad, I was looking at what to do next. I had a very lucrative role for about 1.5 years after Merck, actually, into doing consulting to Deloitte and Touche. It was helping the Prudential sell off their healthcare division. It was just all accounting stuff and IT work, but very, very lucrative for me.
Knowing how buildings and facilities are set up was very helpful for you to do that job, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I always laughed that I never wanted to do HVAC controls anymore. I did it for 10 years and I loved it. It was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. It's a very fulfilling career. I've forgotten more than most guys will learn, which is a shame, really. I want to get to the point where we're working on the control side of this whole platform, which I think starts to answer your question a little bit if I'm giving away too much of a secret here, but that's where this whole thing is going. It is a control system. And the lighting, as I had mentioned earlier, it's just the low-hanging fruit. It's the ubiquitous application that every building needs. And so once you get in at that layer, you start replacing all these other layers of controls that used to be put into the building. And now, if you want to do indoor air quality sensing or temperature and humidity between the interstice between floors, the sensor is right there at the light. And you just either click, plug it in, or it's already in the fixture's connector. We call it a smart interface block, the SIB. Same thing with the light switches. Light switches, they're just a control center for the panel. So why not have temperature, humidity, CO2, maybe PM 2.5? You can get a PM 2.5 sensor now that's smaller than a dime. So you can fit it inside. And imagine putting in sound pressure level meters. So you're not monitoring people's conversations, but you can tell if there's a gunshot, or you can tell if people are screaming or there's a party. There's all kinds of build to rent benefits when you have this. People put in these different applications that are little plug-in modules usually, but guests will find those things, unplug them during their stay, and then the host has to go back and find them. Well, once you start building in all of this stuff, it becomes smart from the start, like you had said. And I think that's the real revolution that Lumen Cache is bringing about, because it actually makes the apps workable. It makes the apps function the way they've been promised to us all this time. And I don't want to make the apps. I don't know if you guys know the Michael Jordan Nike shoe story, but basically Air Jordan, the Nike shoe was very clever because the more important thing was Michael Jordan. His brand of the shoe is going to allow us to make a lot of shoes. And so I see myself as I just want to make shoes. We just want to make the platform, but on top of it will be all of these smart applications. And we've already got Lance Manlove, for example, is building this home OS. And he's doing it because the insurance companies didn't like paying out on dripping ducts. And so if we can detect that, which we can detect humidity at the fixtures or inside, not only in the space, but in the interstice, then now all of a sudden his insurance company says, oh, cool, hey, we'll give you a premium discount on that. How about leak detectors? If you want to have a leak detector anywhere, you just plug it into the closest light switch. You don't need to run a separate thing. You don't have to worry about commissioning. ERVs and exhaust fans. There's a feature that we have called Partner Bus. And what Partner Bus does is if, let's say, you're a Panasonic exhaust fan or an ERV, right now they probably have to do some wireless thing and then figure out, well, how are we going to put our wireless mesh on top of the rest of the wireless mesh in the house? And then we've got a house under construction and I really need repeaters to get the coverage. And it's just, again, wireless doesn't solve the problem. But if you can imagine just the electrician or the plumber, whatever, is just plugging in the exhaust fan. And then as soon as they do, the other exhaust fans in the house that are also the same, let's say, Panasonic brand, start talking to each other. And so it creates a virtual LAN, a VLAN, automatically between brands. And what that does is it DIY levels the installation so that the product can work much better, because the application engineers who designed the product just said, oh, I don't have to worry about all these wireless stacks and commissioning and connectivity and are you in the same group as me? It's just boom. The data comes in the serial port and it's, oh, okay, that one's at level 5. I need to be at level 5 to match it or whatever. They can focus on the really good stuff, which is the control algorithms that they should be focusing on, not worrying about batteries, wireless coverage, all the other stuff.
You have the vision for the future and you're actually implementing that. Is there anyone else operating in a similar train of thinking?
That's a great question, because we're often asked by investors, who's your competitors? And specifically, I say all of our competitors are potential future partners. And I say that because of the nature of the power distribution modules and those plug-in cards. I don't see anybody who's doing it quite like we're doing it. Maybe the IP is holding up, spooking them off a little bit. But for example, ATX LED uses a 4-wire Dolly-based light switch and lights. Dematic uses a 2-wire power line carrier. So they don't use Cat5 like PoE Texas does, or PoWit, for example. What happens was we made two PDMs, two power distribution models. One of them has RJ45 jacks, so you get 8 ports at a time. But then right next to it, you can have these 4-conductor power line carrier, Dolly DMX, anything that uses 2 or 4 conductors. And that's it. That's all we needed to cover everything. Single pair Ethernet works under the same thing. You could do single pair Ethernet on a Cat5, and you can also do single pair Ethernet that's carrying more current under this other PDM. Even if those companies go out of business, which happens quite often. In the 12 years I've been doing this, I've known, unfortunately, several peers who have gone out of business. And I say unfortunately because the real competitor is AC, the incumbent. And so I really want all these other DC companies to help succeed with us. And whether they eventually make cards that can snap in, and then again, the compatibility is transparent to the building owner. That's the benefit they get. They get a piece of the market. And again, we're just making that smart platform underneath that ties it all together. But yeah, I think wireless is still getting better. We actually use wireless. It sounds funny, but as much as I was beating on wired is really important, we actually use wireless in the panels. It's kind of funny. It's the backup. If the CAN bus were to fail and the RS-45 were to fail, there's a wireless backup. So it's got 2 levels.
You've thrown out a lot of terminology in this. Is there somewhere, because the website is Lumen Cache, and that's CACHE, is there somewhere on there that somebody can go to essentially build or visualize a system and choose the components that they would need to set a system up? Or is that something they need to contact you guys for?
Yeah. So there's a technology page that helps to describe some of the big pictures right now. We really didn't do anything about announcing all the details on the Renetta product, because Renetta is the Gen 2. This is the thing that I had started envisioning in 2014, 2016 when I came out to do hacks. It got much closer. And then during COVID, just got refined. And I just said, I don't care if I have investment or not. I'm going to make this. I know how to do it now. Plus, I got like a advanced electrical engineering degree from MIT and Stanford because they were all courses online. had nothing else to do when you're trapped here in Shenzhen during the lockdowns. But we do have a really cool design tool. And so right now, if somebody just sends a set of electrical plans, we very quickly turn around a full set of single line drawings. There's a video on the technology page that shows how the design tool works. And hopefully by this time next year, that design tool is public, meaning it's a web-based tool. You just go onto there. And what's really fun about it is I remember products that touched on trying to do this, and they were so early and just such innovators. It's like I would learn from each one of those products and say, okay, they failed, but why? Like the concept was pretty cool. And maybe it was technology that wasn't ready but so one of the coolest things I find is that the salesperson can very quickly scope out a project. Then if they're naming the things as they go along, all of that data gets squirted right into the product, right into the installation. And so you can even monitor. So let's say you plop in a 5G card on site. So if you've got a builder that's doing 50 homes and they're doing 5 homes at a time, they might get 5 of these cards, pop them in. And then as the guys are installing it, they can literally watch exactly what percentage is installed and is it all correct. So it saves money for the designer, it saves sales time, it saves the installation time on many facets. And then when they turn that over to the homeowner, when the homeowner says, this is interesting, I think I would like to use dimming. And so they scan the QR code on it, and then instantly it just pulls up all the names. And so it already says kitchen lights, bathroom lights. It's like they didn't have to do all the commissioning configuration that would normally go along with it. And it's the salesperson that set that up quite easily. So the design tool, right now, it's built on Visio and the code engine behind that. So it's really not something that we want to publish just yet, but that will all be online.
And you do have a order page.
Yeah.
There's a place to actually order products. And you've got kits. Thank goodness.
We do. So the first kits, if you guys would like to play with one, I'd be happy to send you one so you can actually play with it. And then you can record your own experiences with it, which is be fun. We'll see if you are as good as a 6-year-old.
Ooh. The gauntlet's been thrown, but that gauntlet was a mitten.
And that's really the level. I mean, everything is connectorized. So it's like you can't plug it in wrong. It's kind of like the back of your computer. If you notice, you can only plug in the HDMI one way. You can only plug in everything only fits in one connector. So it works the same way as that. But in July, we basically said, okay, in November, we're going to be launching and we'll have the first product release. So we opened it up for pre-order. And it was kind of an interesting business decision because basically what happened was I had about $120,000 left of the Libre inventory, the old original prototype product, which again sold 2.2 million of that around the world. So that was the rest of the runway. Basically, I was like, I'm not taking any more orders for Libre. We're only selling Renetta, the new Gen 2 product. But if your project falls in September, October, and you need to get your certificate of occupancy, we'll just give you the Libre. And so you can get through CO. And what's cool about it is how fast it is to change it out. You can imagine if you had to replace the control system. Usually it's got Phoenix connectors and blocks on it, so you can unplug things. Well, it's the same thing. The same thing that makes it really nice to be able to service and maintain. You can swap out the entire thing in 15 minutes. That's what we're doing with the early things. But the coolest number is we've got a couple of customers now that so far, these are named projects. Our named project pipeline has over $9 million in it already from just a few months of sales. Now, granted, I have been winding up this spring for 12 years. So when I send out 3,000 people on my mailing list, it was like, oh my gosh, thank God, finally, Derek, what the hell took you so long? We've been waiting for this for so long. And I'm like, yeah, this is hard. This wasn't easy. Do you know how hard it is to make a crossed wire detector and something that's fault managed power and ubiquitous for any application is going to be for the next 30 years, and the backplane has to last 30 years, but the cards can change every month. And all of that complexity took a lot of experience. And I wish from my personal life that this went faster, but it takes time. It takes time to do something like this complete.
You said the Libre has been installed for a number of years, the Libre suite of products. And the Renetta. What does Renetta stand for, by the way?
What do you think? So the R, the N, and the A are capital.
Okay.
So the RNA is like the building block of DNA.
Ah.
And renewable net A, it's the first renewable network. So that name combined together, there's a whole nother product that's going to be a different brand. It's highly compatible and interchangeable with Renetta, and it's called Epic. So Renetta is meant for production home builders. That's what it was designed for. I had a decision point about a year ago where I was going to limit it to about 40 watts per port, because on average, that's about what it uses. And instead, what I said is, I'm just going to make it 80. By making it 80 watts per port, what happens is it really opens it up for commercial. Very easy to just blast in 2x4 lights, 2x2s. You can tie 2 ports together if you need to get it like 150 watts for, let's say, a high bay light. So the Renetta, though, was really meant to be residential. And one of the reasons why is because most competitors don't want to do that. They feel like it's a commodity product or commodity market. So the bottom has already been reached. But as Gon Zafroni, he's like, we're making a whole new industry, a whole new market now, this smart energy for everyone. I love the way that sounds because it's going to usher in, again, thankfully, the builders are the ones that have the confidence because it solves their problems. But as far as a homeowner, if you did want to put in the dimmings capability and you do want to add human-centric lighting and color tunable lights, or you want to put a sensor in somewhere, it's trivial to do it. And you can turn it on and you can turn it off just as easily. So if it doesn't reach that wife acceptance factor, you just turn it off. But it's built in. It's like the cost of me doing this was so minimal because the technology enables me to do it at a very low cost. So it just makes sense for us to provide those kinds of services as an opt-in. And the same thing goes for data layers, for example. You don't require any service contracts. There's no monthly fees, none of that. You buy it, you own it. If you want to have features, if you want to have additional services, oh, of course. Not only can we do that, but if you've looked on the website, there's a 9th socket on each one of the PDMs, power distribution module. What does the 9th socket do, you might ask?
Powers the Death Star?
Oh, damn it, you guys are good. You can't mess with controls, guys. You're just really smart.
That's right. The logic is embedded.
I keep forgetting you're not lighting guys.
I never knew the Death Star was power over Ethernet. It's new information to me.
It's actually PoE is power over evil.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
That's awesome. And it doesn't have to be PoE. We can use whatever standard you want. But the ninth slot, what that actually adds is Ethernet. So the core product, like why build Ethernet, which is overkill, into the product? Like really what you need to do is just have a lighting control package. That's what builders want. You hit the light switch, the light turns on. You want to charge your USB, you want to turn your exhaust fan on, everything just works. But if you've got, let's say, two PoE cameras, instead of installing a separate switch for that, you can just put two PoE PD cards in there. So they're 802.3 BT mid spans. And so in order to get to the Ethernet hub, you can pop in the gateway card. And the gateway card is the ninth slot. It talks Ethernet to each one of the 8 slots. And let's say you want to have a BACnet interface to it because you said, oh, I got a commercial system here. I got to have BACnet talking. No problem. Throw in a BACnet card. What happens if 5 years from now, quantum computers crack the 256-bit codes? So now we need a 10,000-bit hash code. No problem. Buy a new gateway card. The gateway cards might be, I don't know, $20, $50, $100. So the whole point is that the modular design, the core IP is around how I separated each one of the different types of functions that's optimized for the way you actually build products. And it turns out it manifests itself quite nicely into the finished product that's something that's really easy. It looks like Atari cards. And if you guys remember, you used to have to use an eraser and breathe on them.
Right.
There's a throwback right there, an Atari card.
Remember that?
And also you built the modules so if something changes in the future, you can upgrade that aspect of the system.
Exactly. So what's really cool is you can have a 10-year-old system and a brand new technology, something we haven't even imagined right now. And you take that new card and you pop it in, and it will talk at compatibility level with the old stuff. That was critical. It's funny because my first experience with BACnet was 89, 88, 89. And some of the comments that were made were from my boss. It's in his name, but I was the kid that was behind it. And I was so impressed with BACnet because it's like 90% of BACnet was about standard on-off alert messaging, but 10% was extensible. And every manufacturer for the next 10 years, I remember, was dabbling in the extensible part of the protocol because that's what differentiated them a little bit. But they always had that compatibility part. So when the operator or the machine operator wanted to have a screen full of numbers or the color graphics, whatever it is, they could do that. Nowadays, you need two things. One, I think it's about 30% standard, 70% extensible. The world's changing very fast. And so we need to have some standards, which is what Matter is trying to do, the Matter protocol. But it's not even out of the gate, and it's overbloated at this point. They're still having trouble getting people to agree on what a light switch is constructed of. That was one piece, is how do we solve the protocol such that it can be 30% standard, 70% open. But at the same time, like you said, you can pop in a new card. So now the hardware actually evolves just as fast. It's an extensible hardware. So not only can you grow it, but you can also evolve it. And we've got a great web. I remember one of my favorite slides shows this AI person, and it's basically showing that the hardware can evolve as quickly as the software.
That's a little bit different than a lot of things I've seen out there on the market today.
As we wrap up here, the contact information, we have, of course, your website, the LinkedIn page. And I think you should follow Derek if you're into LinkedIn. He has some great lines of thinking, I'll just say, about partnership and manufacturing and just the whole aspect outside of the great work he's doing with the products he's developing. Any other good ways of contacting you? Just through the website mainly?
Best way is through the Contact Us. That goes right into our CRM system. We've got a great team. I'm super happy with it. You know, if you look back at the best management consultants talk about the Star Trek team and the personalities of each one of them, we have the same thing. And it was really funny when I finally discovered who Spock was in the team. And it's not me, just so you know. But we've got Bones. Stephen holds the team together. You've got Scotty, who's gone, who just gets us out of the black hole and where we got to be. And it's really fun. I think that you're going to see that we'll be able to adopt and adapt to the changing market too. And definitely come on board, try the system out, put an order in for a demo kit. If you can't use it at work, take it home, put it in your house. I mean, it's just the coolest thing is you can install a 5 kilowatt hour battery in 15 minutes, just 3 connectors, 2 positive, negative, CAN bus. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a week's worth of resilience in your house. That's game-changing speed. That is all because the technology is the way it is and how it's structured.
Any closing thoughts for our listeners?
I would love to follow up and do another one of these in either 6 or 12 months. And the reason why is because, again, I've got my control systems hat on here. And I think that there's going to be a flood of people saying, oh, can we do this? And how do we do this? And can we do this? And look, I made this. In other words, we're actually going to have Hack the Home and there's products we're going to make that will allow you to individually make your own custom pieces safely. So we'll manage the safety and the security of the data. But then on top of it, you can add whatever circuits you want onto the card. I'm really looking forward to the creativity. I know your audience. They're just some of the brightest people that know mechanical, electrical, hydro. They're going to come up with these amazing solutions. And as I said, we just want to make shoes.
Absolutely. And we will follow up. Definitely. I will put that as a reminder there. Derek, can't thank you enough for spending the time with us here today and illuminating on this topic.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be amongst peers again, too, in the controls world.
Thanks for coming on, Derek. We really appreciate it. And I'm definitely excited to follow up because I see some stuff you've talked about on your website with regards to things like indoor air quality sensors and temperature sensors for the HVAC. So definitely want to see where that goes in the future.
There's a couple of really big leads on that topic. As I said, Lance Manlove is the first one who is influencing the insurance companies. There's a gentleman in Australia who is connected in with all the electricians and such, and he's got the same problem. They're building these super, super tight homes, and they're all getting stuffy and over humidity and high humidity problems. He just sees this as one of those game-changing things for every new construction project, and also asked about retrofits too. So there's going to be plenty of topics that you guys will be interested in, and I'd love to have the follow-up.
Great. Thanks again, Derek.
Thank you. Thanks. Good talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Building HVAC Science podcast. We appreciate when you follow us, when you like us, when you subscribe to us, do whatever you need to us, but we appreciate it. If you're in the market for any tools or test instruments, got to plug TruTech Tools, www.trutechtools.com. You can use the offer code HVACBS for a nice discount. Some of the topics we discuss require technical training for a proper interpretation or safe execution. So if you're a trained pro, you can go right ahead. If you're not, please consult with and hire a trained pro. The Building HVAC Science podcast is a production of TruTech Tools Limited. In full disclosure, I'm the owner of TruTech Tools. The opinions voiced are those of my guests, my co-host, or myself, depending on who is speaking, of course. We really appreciate you listening to this episode of the Building HVAC Science podcast. If you have any ideas for more, just want to feed back to us, drop a line to marketing@trutechtools.com, TruTechTools.com. Thanks again for listening to the Building HVAC Science podcast. Until next time, take care.